My name is Emily Carter, and I am 22 years old. Until last spring, my life was quiet and predictable. I lived with my parents in a small town in Ohio, in the same white house with blue shutters where I grew up. My mom planted flowers along the porch every year, and my dad fixed things that were not even broken. It was the kind of home that felt steady and safe. For 22 years, I was their only child. Friday nights were pizza and movies. Sunday mornings were pancakes before church. On my birthday, my mom still baked a chocolate cake, even when I told her I was too old for candles. I never imagined there was room for someone else to take my place. Everything changed on a rainy afternoon in April. I had just come home from my shift at the pharmacy when I noticed a strange car in our driveway. The front door was open, and I could hear quiet voices inside. When I stepped into the living room, I stopped. My parents stood beside a small girl holding a worn backpack against her chest. She looked about 10 years old. She was thin, pale, and silent, with straight dark hair partly covering her eyes. Her shoes looked too big for her feet. My mom smiled warmly. "Emily," she said, "this is Lily. She's going to be your little sister." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. My father cleared his throat. "We're adopting her. She needs a family." The girl looked up at me then. Her dark eyes were still and unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She just watched me. I forced a smile because that is what good daughters do. "Hi, Lily," I said softly. She didn't answer. That night, my mom asked me to help set up a bed for her in my room. Just for a few days. Lily stood in the doorway, clutching her backpack, as if it held everything she owned. I told myself to be kind. She'd probably been through things I could never understand, so I shared my space. I gave her my extra blanket. When she woke from a nightmare, I sat beside her until she fell asleep again. But even then, something felt strange. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night and found her sitting upright in bed, staring at me in the dark. Not crying, not scared, just watching. Weeks passed, and my parents' attention slowly shifted. They praised Lily for finishing her dinner, for folding her clothes, for saying please. These were things I had done my entire life without anyone noticing. Then the comparisons began. "Why can't you be more patient like Lily?" my mom said one evening. My dad proudly taped one of Lily's drawings to the refrigerator. Meanwhile, my college acceptance letter sat unopened on the kitchen counter. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself families grow and make space. But I began to feel like a visitor in my own home. One afternoon after work, I went to my room and noticed my favorite silver bracelet was missing. It had belonged to my grandmother. I searched everywhere until Lily walked into the kitchen holding it. "I found this in Emily's backpack," she said quietly. My mother looked at me with disappointment. "Why would you hide something and pretend it's lost?" she asked. "I didn't," I whispered. Lily stood behind her, silent, her dark eyes fixed on me. That was the first crack in my life. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something I had never felt before in my own home. Uncertainty. I told myself things would get better. I told myself this was just an adjustment. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered a truth I wasn't ready to face. Something had changed, and I was no longer the daughter my parents believed. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Living with Lily began to feel like living with a quiet shadow. She moved softly through the house, never making noise, never asking for anything. My parents called her polite and grateful. They praised her for finishing her dinner and folding her clothes neatly. I had done those same things my whole life, but suddenly they seemed special when Lily did them. I told myself she deserved the attention. She had been through hard things. I tried to ignore the small ache growing inside my chest. But Lily watched everything. She noticed where my mom kept her purse, when my dad left for work, and what time I came home each evening. Sometimes I caught her standing in the hallway, listening when my parents and I talked. Whenever I looked directly at her, she lowered her eyes and became quiet again. It made me feel like I was imagining things. At dinner, my parents asked Lily about her school day before they asked about mine. My mom packed her lunch with little notes inside. My dad helped her with homework at the table, even though he had never helped me with mine. I started staying late at work just to avoid feeling invisible. One evening, I came home and found my mother sitting stiffly on the couch. My father stood near the window with his arms crossed. Lily sat between them holding a tissue. My stomach tightened. "What happened?" I asked. My mother's voice was cold. "Lily says you yelled at her this afternoon and told her she doesn't belong here." The words hit me like ice. "What? I wasn't even home." Lily sniffed softly. "She told me this isn't my family," she whispered. "She said I should go back where I came from." My father's jaw tightened. "Emily, we will not tolerate cruelty in this house." "I didn't say that," I said, my voice shaking. "I was at work. You can call my manager." But my parents were already exchanging disappointed looks, the kind that made me feel small and unfamiliar. Lily leaned closer to my mother. "I'm trying to be good," she whispered. My mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders and looked at me with hurt in her eyes. "Why are you jealous of a child?" she asked. Jealous. The word stung more than the accusation. I went to my room and closed the door quietly, even though my hands were trembling. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the pale blue walls I had chosen when I was 12. Suddenly, the room didn't feel like mine anymore. That night, I lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the house. Around midnight, I sensed movement. I opened my eyes. Lily stood in the doorway. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was looking straight at me. In the dim hallway light, her face looked calm, almost thoughtful. Then she slowly closed the door. The next morning, my mother barely spoke to me. My father left without saying goodbye. Lily ate her cereal quietly, swinging her feet beneath the chair like nothing had happened. Over the next few days, small things continued to go wrong. My phone charger disappeared. My favorite sweater turned up behind the washing machine. Lily found my missing earrings inside my coat pocket. Each time, my parents sighed as if I were careless and irresponsible. Each time, Lily remained quiet and helpful. Each time, I felt myself slipping further out of my own life. One afternoon, as I walked past the hallway mirror, I stopped and stared at my reflection. I looked tired, older, like someone who didn't belong in her own home. Behind me, Lily's voice drifted softly through the hallway. "You should smile more," she said. I turned. She stood there holding one of my textbooks, her expression calm and unreadable. Then she smiled. It was small, perfect, and completely empty. In that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. Not anger, not jealousy, fear. Because I was starting to understand that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was something much worse, and I had the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. By the third week, the house no longer felt warm or safe. It felt like a place where I had to be careful with everything I said and did. My parents spoke to me politely, but the warmth was gone. They laughed with Lily, praised her kindness, and watched movies with her in the evenings. I sat beside them sometimes, but it felt like I was watching someone else's family. I started staying longer at work just to avoid going home. One Tuesday afternoon, my shift ended early because the pharmacy was slow. Dark rain clouds filled the sky as I drove home. I sat in the car for a moment before going inside, trying to calm the tight feeling in my chest. The front door was slightly open. Inside, the house was quiet. "Hello?" I called. No answer. Then I heard a loud crash from upstairs, followed by a scream. "Mom!" It was Lily. I ran toward the staircase just as my parents rushed out of the kitchen. Lily lay at the bottom of the stairs, crying and clutching her arm. My mother gasped and dropped beside her. "What happened?" Lily struggled to breathe. Her eyes lifted slowly and locked onto me. "She pushed me," she whispered. Everything froze. "I did not," I shouted. "I just got home." My father's face hardened. "Emily, stop." "I wasn't even upstairs." Lily sobbed harder and pressed against my mother. "She told me to stay out of her room. Then she pushed me." My mother turned toward me with a look I had never seen before. Not anger, but betrayal. Before I could speak again, her hand struck my cheek. The sound echoed through the hallway. I tasted salt and metal as tears filled my eyes, more from shock than pain. "How could you?" she whispered. "I didn't do this," I said, my voice breaking. "Please believe me." But my parents were already focused on Lily, lifting her gently, comforting her, whispering soft words as if I were no longer in the room. As if I no longer mattered. At the hospital, the doctor said Lily's arm was only sprained. My parents stayed beside her, praising her bravery and promising ice cream on the way home. No one looked at me. I sat alone in the waiting area, staring at the floor, replaying the moment again and again. When we returned home, my father spoke in a voice that felt like a closed door. "We will not have violence in this house." "I didn't push her." "Enough, Emily." That single word ended the conversation. That night, I sat on my bed in the dark, my cheeks still warm where my mother had slapped me. Downstairs, I could hear soft laughter as my parents watched a movie with Lily. The sound felt like something breaking inside me. Around midnight, my bedroom door creaked open. I didn't move. I pretended to be asleep. Soft footsteps crossed the room. I felt her presence beside my bed. Then, in a whisper so quiet it almost blended with the darkness, Lily spoke. "No one believes you." My eyes flew open. She stood beside me, her injured arm resting in a sling. There were no tears now, only that small, empty smile. Then she turned and walked out, closing the door without a sound. I lay there frozen, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. That was the moment fear replaced confusion. I was not losing my place in this family. I was being pushed out. And deep down, I knew the worst was still coming. After the stairs incident, the house felt colder than winter. My parents no longer argued with me. They no longer asked questions. They simply believed Lily. Silence replaced conversation. Distance replaced love. I moved through the house like a stranger renting a room. My mother spoke to me only when necessary. "Dinner is in the oven. Take the trash out. That bill is on the counter." My father avoided eye contact altogether. Meanwhile, Lily healed quickly. Within a week, her sling was gone, and she was smiling again. The quiet, innocent smile my parents adored. But when they weren't looking, she watched me. Always watching. One afternoon, I came home from work and found Lily sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. My parents were still at work. I walked past her toward the stairs. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. I stopped. "This is my home," I replied. She tilted her head slightly. "Not anymore." A chill ran through me. I continued upstairs without answering. That evening, everything exploded. My parents were sitting in the living room when I walked in. Lily sat between them, her eyes red like she had been crying. My stomach dropped. My father stood up slowly. "Lily says you threatened her today." My heart began pounding. "That's not true." "She said you told her she should disappear," my mother added, her voice shaking. "I never said that." Lily wiped her eyes. "I'm scared to stay here," she whispered. My mother pulled her close. My father looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. "We can't keep living like this," he said. I felt the floor shift beneath me. "What does that mean?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "If you can't accept your sister," she said quietly, "maybe you should find somewhere else to stay." The words hit harder than the slap. "You're asking me to leave?" No one answered. That silence was my answer. I stood there waiting for someone to stop this, to say it was a mistake, to choose me. They didn't. So I walked upstairs and packed a suitcase with shaking hands. Clothes, shoes, my grandmother's photo. The few things that still felt like mine. When I carried the suitcase down the stairs, my mother was crying softly. My father stared at the floor. Lily watched from the couch. She wasn't crying anymore. She was calm. As I reached the door, my hand trembled on the handle. I waited one last second, hoping to hear the words every daughter needs to hear. Stay. They never came. I stepped outside into the cold night air. The door closed behind me, and just like that, I was no longer their daughter. I slept in my car that night in a grocery store parking lot, curled beneath a thin blanket, staring at the ceiling, and trying to understand how my life had fallen apart so quickly. The second night was colder. By the third day, a coworker named Jenna noticed the dark circles under my eyes and insisted I stay at her apartment. I told her only part of the truth, because saying it out loud made it feel impossible to survive. Days passed. My parents did not call. They did not text. It was as if I had disappeared. Then, 2 weeks later, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. My heart leaped into my throat. I answered immediately. But instead of relief, I heard panic. "Emily," she said, her voice shaking, "something is wrong." I sat up straight. "What happened?" There was a long pause. Then she whispered the words that made my skin turn cold. "Lily told the school counselor we abuse her, and now Child Protective Services is coming." The room went silent around me. For the first time, my parents were afraid. And for the first time, they were beginning to see the truth. But it was already too late to undo what they had done. And deep inside, I knew. This was only the beginning of everything falling apart. After my mother's call, everything moved quickly. Child Protective Services investigated my parents' home. Lily told them she was beaten, starved, and treated like she didn't belong. She cried on command. She told detailed stories that sounded real. For the first time, my parents felt what it was like not to be believed. They called me again and again, asking questions, asking if I had noticed signs, asking if I thought she was lying. I told them the truth I had been saying from the beginning. But trust, once broken, doesn't return overnight. 2 weeks later, Lily disappeared. She took cash from my father's wallet and jewelry from my mother's dresser. Police found her 3 days later, staying with an older man in another town. Investigators soon uncovered a pattern: multiple foster homes, repeated false abuse claims, theft, and manipulation. She had learned how to divide families to gain sympathy and money, exactly what she had done to ours. My parents were devastated. My mother cried on the phone. My father's voice sounded older, smaller. "We failed you," he said. I didn't know how to answer, because they had, and we all knew it. A few days later, they came to see me. They stood outside Jenna's apartment looking like strangers carrying the weight of regret. My mother hugged me and sobbed into my shoulder. My father could barely meet my eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I wanted to collapse into her arms like I used to. I wanted everything to be normal again. But normal was gone. Some wounds don't close that easily. I agreed to return home only to collect the rest of my belongings. Walking back into the house felt surreal. The air smelled the same. The furniture sat in the same places, but something invisible had shattered. My room looked untouched, like I had never left. While gathering my things, my father handed me a folder. "This belongs to you," he said quietly. Inside were legal documents. My hands trembled as I read. My grandmother had placed the house in my name when I turned 18. The house legally belonged to me. I looked up slowly. "You threw me out? Of my own house?" My parents stared at the floor. They hadn't known. They had never checked. They had simply believed Lily and pushed me away. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger the way I expected. I felt clarity. The next day, I changed the locks. Not out of revenge, out of boundaries. I allowed my parents to stay temporarily, but things were different now. Trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, with honesty and accountability. No more blind belief, no more silence, no more choosing comfort over truth. Some nights the house feels quiet and heavy with memory. Healing is not quick. Forgiveness is not simple. But I have learned something I will never forget. They gave her my place. They believed her lies. They pushed me out. But losing everything taught me my worth, and this time, my life belongs to me.